Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to yet another Workshop Wednesday. Today, we had a slight change in what our topic was going to be because there's a massive amount of change. Let's just face that. In the Google Analytics world in particular, there is now this huge new thing called Google Analytics 4. And so we've created this workshop to help you answer, okay, what the heck is Google Analytics 4 and do I need it? Do I have to start using it? Because there is so much confusion that is happening with this particular platform right now. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that, you and I, as we dive in. Of course, if you are new to Workshop Wednesday, welcome. My name is Chris Mercer. I actually do go by Mercer, and I'm the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io. And maybe you found us through the podcast and talks that our instructors do, including myself and other instructors, maybe through the courses that we've got at CXL Institute or platforms like Social Media Examiner, Digital Marketer, Measure Summit, even measurementmarketing.io. Maybe you're already a member of the Measurement Marketing Academy over there, or a Toolbox member at measurementmarketing.io, our free level of membership. However you found us, welcome. We love having you here as part of Workshop Wednesday. It is, of course, our job to help people like you figure out how to use all these fun tools. Specifically, we're going to talk about today, of course, Google Analytics, and more importantly, Google Analytics 4. Which is a completely new thing, so we can help you wrap your head around it. Now, we always talk about grabbing one thing, one new concept, one new framework, one new tool or tactic, and then you practice it, and you come back and you grab another new thing and another new thing. This is going to be one of those videos that hopefully you won't be able to watch over and over again. But the concept here is this is not going to teach you how to use Google Analytics 4. There's entire courses for that. We have a course for that you can do. But this is really, because this is a strategy session workshop, this is designed to help you figure out what this thing is, how to wrap your head around it, how urgent is it that you flip everything over to it. And there's a lot of misinformation that's flying around because things are moving so quickly. So that's what this workshop is. It's a strategy session. It's here to help you figure out, should I even be using this thing? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and dive right in and take a look at that. All right. So first, I am going to bring up Google Analytics 4. I mean, why not? We want to be able to see what this thing is, right? So here's Google Analytics 4. And I want to give you a very quick tour. Again, you are not going to be an expert in Google Analytics 4, but I want to show you first and foremost how different this thing is. Google Analytics 4 is a completely new Google Analytics program. It is a completely new Google Analytics platform, is probably the better way of saying that. So this, and we'll explain the whys in just a moment here, but I wanted you to see it. You can tell immediately how different it looks. The real-time report's completely different. You can tell immediately there are completely different reports back here, and they're not the easiest to use. I'm going to say that up front, but they are back here. You can also see that you've got things called events that are here. You think, oh, like Google Analytics events. Cool, I know those. Yeah, not really. These are completely different looking events, right? And there's rules to these events, and there's things that you turn on events as conversions and off. There's a lot back here. It's a completely different way of looking at things. And if that wasn't enough, you go, well, let's go look at the regular reports because I want to, analyze some stuff, right? I want to get some insights from our data. Well, you goes, okay, which one do you want to analyze? Okay, I guess I'll go to a funnel or a cohort or an exploration or a path analysis. Don't get me wrong. This stuff is amazing, but it's really, really confusing. There's a lot to it. Does this look easy to use? Right? Like you come through here and you're like, okay, now I'll give you a clue. After you kind of get your basics down, there's a little bit of a learning curve and it is easier to get some of the answers you might be looking for. But man, at first glance, this is not the easiest thing to wrap yourself around. And the whole point of this little tour for you and I to go through right now is the fact of how different it is. Now, one of the big reasons why people are freaking out so much about Google Analytics 4 right now is because Google made one very important change, technically two. One is they renamed what it was. It used to be called App and Web. The biggest difference is when they go to create a property now, it forces you into Google Analytics 4. And I will say as a pro tip, technically you can go to advanced options and you can create an analytics property that's universal still. And you'd want to do both. This is what I would do, is set these up if you're doing a new account. But when it forced everybody to use Google Analytics 4, and then it dumps them into something that looks so radically different as this one does, right? When you look at the real-time report, it's super cool. It's incredibly useful. And it will be something you're going to want to take a look at, but it's radically different. And it's not going to be as useful as Universal Analytics is to you, at least not yet. So why did they do this? What was the whole thinking behind this? And that's really what I wanted you to understand as we go through here. So I'm actually going to bring up a different screen. So we're going to bring up, if I have it here we go, our fancy little Lucidchart diagram. We're going to explain, we're going to try to figure out and think this through. Like, what was the point of this? Why does this thing even exist? And should you even use it to start? So first, let's talk about what's been going on with Universal Analytics. Now, Universal Analytics has been measuring hits, right? They measure hits. An example of a hit would be a page view. And they include all those different hits, all those different page views in a session, and they assign that session to a user, and that's how everything sort of works. And Universal's done a pretty good job of that. But what's starting to happen is, instead of something that looks like this, where you have, hits being collected, and then you have more hits being collected, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see what's starting to happen here. Instead of something that looks like this, in today's world, sometimes a user will come to your site, and you've probably already experienced this. They'll come to your site, only the hits don't get collected. Why? Maybe because they didn't give consent. Maybe because there's ad blockers. Maybe because the technology just wasn't there, right? Something broke along the way. Or worse, maybe they show up as a completely different user, right? That sort of stuff happens a lot. And then what's really starting to happen is, because of the way that it works, maybe they gave consent initially, but then they removed consent later. So all of a sudden you start seeing, hits come through and they start disappearing. What used to be there isn't there anymore. Now, again, this is already happening. It's going to get worse just as data privacy and everything else continues to roll along, right? As it should, because people should have control of their data. But as a marketer, when you're using Google Analytics, Universal Analytics in particular, you're dealing with less and less data. And you have to get comfortable with the fact that you don't have access to every possible bit of data that you thought you needed. And in reality, you never really did need all of that. And you don't need a lot to actually make some usefulness happen. But this is uncomfortable to have this platform that collects some of the stuff and the rest of the stuff it just can't see. Enter Google Analytics 4. So what Google has done is they've basically said, move this off to the side here. Google Analytics 4 has said, okay, we know there is this world where there's not going to be all this data available all the time. That's just not a thing. It never really was a thing, and everybody sort of convinced themselves it was, but it never really was. I mean, you couldn't collect everything all the time. But it's less and less. It definitely is getting less. Technology's changing. The browsers are changing. Cookies are going away. Like, all of that stuff is clearly happening. So the technology is leading, so it's going to be harder and harder and harder to measure stuff. And so what they did is they said, okay, we're going to have this world where we only have access to some things. So what can we do? Because we're Google, we've got a lot of resources, and we've got machine learning, and we've got this incredible team, and we know what the world now looks like. Remember, when this was built, when Universal was built, technically mobile phones weren't really being measured. They didn't have access to the internet back in the early days. Nobody cared about that stuff. Nobody thought about the Internet of Things and IoT and everything else that goes into play here. Nobody had apps. That wasn't a thing. It didn't exist. But now it totally does. And so what they did is they said, okay, well, today's world, we have to build a new platform that's designed to handle stuff like this. It's designed to figure out different users and measure users across devices from the start. It's not trying to be pigeonholed and trying to be twisted into something that can do it. It just is built to do it. It's built to handle the fact that it's not going to have every single piece of data all the time. And then what it does, and this is actually a pretty cool thing, it'll start using machine learning as it learns, as it gets more data. And with machine learning, it'll start to fill in the blanks. So I'm going to make those kind of like a lighter green here to emphasize. So what it does is it starts to give you a more useful truth than what Universal Analytics might have otherwise done. Because remember, Universal Analytics will only have some of the picture. And generally speaking, the trend is not tomorrow, certainly not over this next year, but probably 5 years out. You might see Universal Analytics not really be all that useful because it just can't collect as much because of the technology or whatever else is out there. And so you have less and less data to make decisions off of. With Google Analytics 4, and this is a major change, this is why you want to start looking at Google Analytics 4, is because it takes limited data coming in because it knows there's going to be less and less coming through, and it's going to help bolster that data, support that data with machine learning to help you fill in the blanks. And it won't look exactly like this. It's not going to make up page views and that sort of thing. But the idea is there, is that you're going to be able to look at the information in Google Analytics 4 and have a useful truth, right? At measurementmarketing.io, we always talk about accuracy is not important, and it isn't. It never was. We call it the A word all the time because accuracy just isn't real. Useful truth is what you want. So that's why we focus on that. So that's what the Google Analytics 4 is this idea of filling in the blanks, right? It's a huge thing. Again, it's also built for today's world because we now know. So it's kind of, Google literally had a chance to say, well, knowing what we know about the internet, knowing what we know about users and devices and everything else, how would we build this platform? So they build it for today's world. So what does that mean? Well, what used to be was Google Analytics. I'll just kind of bring a little box down here. Google Analytics as a platform was good at three things, and it was really built by itself to do three main things. The first thing that it was built to do was to collect information. So let me pull that over here. Zoom out. There we go. Our little zoom fell away. There we go. So it's built to collect information. Zoom back in for you. So first and foremost, built to collect information. The second thing that it did is it stored that information, right? So it did storage. The third thing that it did, it was report that information. And that's, of course, where you and I are using it all the time, where we're back there looking at source media reports and landing page reports and everything else. So it stores, change just the stores. I think that's a better way of saying that. So it collects, it stores, it reports. That's kind of it, right? Collect the information, store the information in the database, report the information. And this is primarily where you and I are interfacing with it, right? With Universal Analytics, getting our answers from. That's all well and good. Unless the world evolves, which it did, more users come in, more devices come in, more behaviors come in, apps have different questions that you're trying to answer versus what a website does. There's different business types of websites. All of a sudden, e-commerce is a thing where it used to be like single page brochure sites. Anybody remember the days of the hit counter? Like that's when Google Analytics was born, in the days of the hit counter, when you could refresh your page and you'd see the little hit counter go up by one and you'd be super happy with how many people saw your page. Like that was what this was built on. This is the architecture. And so at a certain point, no matter how good they wanted Universal to be, they're going to be restricted by that original foundation it was built on. And that's what this was: collect, store, and report. Now, Google Analytics can still do this, right? Google Analytics 4, I should say, GA4. It can still collect, store, and report. But what's starting to happen is you are definitely seeing a 100% move toward a focus on storing the information, where GA4 is there to store. So what collects, right? What collects the information? Well, now, hopefully you've already been using this tool, and this is where you start to see some really cool things happening with the platform overall, with Google as a platform, is you start to see Tag Manager being used to collect information. Why? Because Tag Manager is a platform that is designed to do one thing, which is collect behaviors. That's it, collect the information. It doesn't store it, doesn't do anything like that. It just collects the information and it sends it to the platform of its choosing, right? So in this case, GA4 also sends it to Universal, also sends it to Facebook and to Google Ads and wherever else it needs to send stuff to. So Google Tag Manager is an incredible platform. It's a better platform for collection, so it does collection. That's what it focuses on. Then Google Analytics 4 can store that information. And then what about the reporting? Well, you've already saw a quick little snapshot of what Google Analytics 4 looks like and the reports that are back there. And it is a little harder to wrap your head around answers quickly. It just is right now. Now, it's early days. It doesn't mean it's always going to be, but it is a little bit harder now to get to very fast answers in Google Analytics 4. If any of you have used Facebook Analytics, it's the same thing. Facebook Analytics, very powerful platform, very hard to get real answers from. So what happens is instead of using Google Analytics 4 for your reports, and let's just change that our concept of reporting is more to visualizing our information. Well, now we use Google Data Studio for that. And you start to see that Google's really had this going into play for a while, where they've said, okay, we're going to have this platform, this marketing cloud platform of three components. So we're going to have the collection ability, which is Tag Manager. We're going to store the information in Google Analytics, now Google Analytics 4, and we're going to report on the information. And then the other benefit of GA4, and why this really matters, is because GA4 can do something that GA Universal Analytics could not do, which essentially was analyzing. So it can do deep dive analysis reports. that something like Data Studio can't really do all that well. Data Studio can't analyze stuff. It's designed to display stuff. It's designed to make answers easy and accessible, but it just sort of displays the answers. Yes, it could do some tiny little processing and things like that, but it's not really made for heavy lifting of calculations. Analytics is, in this case, Google Analytics 4 is definitely made for it. So they've turned it into a place to store all of your information, and then you can do some deep dive analysis that you didn't really have the ability to do with Universal Analytics, at least not easily. So the analysis reports are a huge win when it comes to Google Analytics 4. But remember, there's massive changes to this, right? Massive changes to how this actually works. Now, I'm going to bring up again our Google Analytics 4 just to walk you through some of what we mean by reports now. So if I come into our engagement reports, which I'm clicking in here, so you send these little life cycle and there's different reports. And we will not go through all of these now because I don't think it's particularly important at this stage that you know all the bells and whistles. It's just that you know that it looks a little different and kind of, they all have a similar look to them. So I'll show you a few of them so you can see. But in here, you see there's like engagement reports. So it's okay, here's a built-in engagement report, and everything is an event to Google Analytics 4. So it's all these different events that come through. You can see they're a little less user-friendly to read and get through. You can still read them, you still understand what they are, but they take a little bit, they're not as intuitive as Universal Analytics is coming through here, or what to do with them as you come through. You see, okay, page title and screening. So let me ask you a question. Which traffic sources are my top traffic sources, and what are the results of those traffic sources? Okay, well, normally I would go to the source medium report in regular Universal Analytics, but in GA4, what do? Well, do I go to my monetization report? Well, no, I don't want to know about dollars and cents. I want to know about goals. I want to know how many people signed up for something, right? And that's just not easily accessible. It's in here. I'll tell you, the information is in here, but we would have to use something like Data Studio to get something very quickly to it, because these reports are a little harder to wrap your head around as to, how to actually pull meaningful insights. One thing that we are huge proponents of at measurementmarketing.io is information doesn't really mean anything, right? Information doesn't mean anything. What you want is a story. You want your data to tell a story. You want the information that you collect to be structured in a way that tells a story. And this doesn't really help us. This is just a bunch of information. I got some good trend lines. I don't have any action I can take based on this stuff, right? So that's what we use Data Studio for. Which is good. This is a good thing for GA4, as much as it seems like it's going to be work, and it is, because it's a new platform. Don't think about it like an upgrade. I know they said it's an upgrade. It's not an upgrade. It kind of is an upgrade, but it's not. And I'll explain that in a second. It's a completely new platform. So it requires you to not think, oh, this is just a little bit different than Universal. It requires you to think this is completely different than Universal, just if you had bought a completely new analytics package. So those of you that are using Google Analytics, maybe one day use Adobe Analytics. It's completely different. Or you decide to use Facebook Analytics. It's completely different. Or you decide to use Google Analytics 4. It's completely different. Everything's different about it. There's nothing that's the same. So, which is good, because it's Google's way of rebuilding analytics and future-proofing it so that it works into the future. Which is all for it. But just remember, I want you to set your own expectations. There's a lot to this. So you have these reports. Again, they're not overly, useful for a lot of this stuff, to be fair. I don't think it's useful at all. There's a lot of information, and that's what the other analytics report had, and that's why we use Data Studio to actually pull stuff out. Can I see how many people signed up for something or bought something or whatever it is? Sure. I can see purchases. I can see signups. I got my little conversion events coming through here. But again, how do you quickly tie that into a source of traffic, whatever else? Well, that requires some effort and some work, which again, Data Studio helps us with. But where GA4 comes in is this analysis stuff. These are the things that it does really well that Data Studio cannot do. And this is your deep dive answer. So I'm going to pull up, some of the template galleries. You can kind of see, we won't go further than this, but just to see what's possible here. I can build up a user explorer report. That might be how I figure out, traffic sources to results. Exploration reports can help with that. Funnel analysis can help me with a customer journey path, which I think is great. This is a super cool report. It's the one I like a lot. Pathing analysis, where do people go? Kind of similar to the old flow reports in Universal Analytics. It can do Venn diagrams now. right? You have cohort analysis. Again, don't know how great this is. I still like using spreadsheets for cohort analysis, but it's possible. The other thing that's really nice about Google Analytics 4 is that you can inject more information into it. So it's opening up more and more. It has like measurement protocol access now and things like that it's starting to get. It's in what they call alpha stage as of this recording. But it's got more and more stuff coming through. And so more features that you can actually inject data into it. So it's not made to just collect this stuff like page views, but you can push through other sources of data and kind of use this as a big giant behavioral database for a lot of different stuff. And again, I don't think it's immediately ready for you to do that today, but that's why they're building this so that it can be used for that. So I'm going to very quickly explain, and then we'll wrap this up. I want to explain that idea of, okay, why is it an upgrade, but it's not an upgrade? Because they have sold it as an upgrade and as this thing you've got to update, but it's very different from the last time they said that. So let's talk about kind of what this looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a little story. We're going to do a little story. That's how we'll do this. So I'm going to start with Classic Analytics. So we'll pull this up here. So Classic Analytics, for those of you old enough to remember, there was Urchin, which was the original Google Analytics. Google Analytics bought a company called Urchin, which was Urchin Analytics. It's where UTMs come from because it was Urchin tracking modules. So Urchin was bought by Google. They called it Google Analytics. That is what we all now know as Classic Analytics. Then there was something called Universal Analytics. That is what you and I are using today, Universal Analytics. This is the one that we're probably, hopefully, a little bit all rock stars at. We like this one. This is giving us our answers. We connected Data Studio. We're using Tag Manager. It's doing a lot of cool things, tracking users, everything else. Then there was Google Analytics 4. And that's where we find ourselves now, is dealing with this Google Analytics 4, otherwise known as GA4. Okay. Now, this did upgrade years ago to Universal Analytics. What happened was there was some older code that you had on the pages. And I'm going to move this around here. Let's put this right here. So we had some old code that was here on the pages. And there was the old, I'm going to call this platform. So this is the original sort of like reports and everything else that was in there. It's kind of like an older platform. So it was this old platform and the old code. Then what they did is they did do an upgrade and they created the new platform here with Universal. So they came out with this sort of, and it wasn't a complete change, not like GA4 is, but it was like this update and they had, in fact, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to do this. We're going to call this the original because I think this is the best way of doing it. This is an original platform. And then there was this updated platform, because I think that's the truest way of thinking about this. It was the same platform. It was just updated from the original. So they had new reports. They added users in. It did subdomain tracking automatically now. And it opened up a lot. Before, exclusions were a thing. Like it did a great job. And what happened is if you left your old code on the page, your platform still got updated. Eventually you got pushed into the new one. So all of us here are using Universal Analytics no matter what. Nobody's using the old Classic Analytics platform. They might still have the old code, but they're in an updated Universal Analytics account, right? In that property. So then what they did is they said, okay, well, in this process, there is this new code, right? And I'm just going to put this down here as analytics.js because that's what it was. It was like this analytics.js code that came through. So they had this little code called analytics.js. This is the new code. And when you put the new code on, you get access to all the features of the updated platform. That is an honest upgrade. That's an honest update where you say, okay, you were on this, you are on here. None of the URLs are changing. The reports are all in the same spot. It's just that they're better now. And that's what they did. It was a huge enhancement. Well, here's what's actually been happening in the background. And over the last year, maybe you've seen this. So it used to be the code was analytics.js, and then all of a sudden it started changing where that kind of went away. So we're just going to keep that off on the side here. And instead, what they did, we'll change this over. They did something called GTag. And maybe you have seen this. Hopefully you have. So you see this little GTag stuff everywhere where it's in analytics. If you go to tracking code, it says GTag. If you go to Optimize, you have GTag. If you go to Google Ads, it's GTag. Everything's GTag. Well, this is them doing manually tagging. They started this little manual tagging setup, which is great for a lot of enterprises because they can manually tag if they need to. So this little GTag setup. But what that was also doing was laying the infrastructure for this person over here, for this new platform over here. So Google Analytics 4. Now, I'm going to change the color of this because it is radically different. So we're going to keep it over, let's do a little purple. So Google Analytics 4, what they ended up doing, it wasn't like, okay, we're going to move everybody from Universal into Google Analytics 4, because that is not what's happening. There is a 100% disconnect between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. This one was a forced migration. It updated. This one is, hey, we just created this brand new thing. And what they want you to do is to start using it. The biggest mistake they made about a year and a half ago when this first came out was they called it App and Web Analytics. And everybody looked at it and said, App and Web Analytics, that looks awesome, but I don't have an app, so I don't have to start using it. So then they renamed it and they call it Google Analytics 4. And they go, everyone all of a sudden pays attention and says, wow, brand new Google Analytics. That's new. Really, it's not new. It's just a renamed App and Web. But, the world, for most people, it does look new, right? Because now they're paying attention to it. And Google started making people open accounts in Google Analytics 4 because Google needs this move to happen. This is important. And this isn't just Google trying to arm wrestle us into this. We need this to happen because we need to be in a platform that's built for today's world, right? You need to be in a platform when you're talking about measurement that's built for today's world. So that's why, and that is exactly what Google Analytics 4 is. That's why it exists. It's for this. So, but it is completely different from Universal. It's not an upgrade. It's a completely different platform. Right? So this becomes, I'm going to say new, right? This is a new platform. So you've got the updated, you've got this brand new one coming through. That's what this is. So does that mean that you have to start using GA4 right now from a strategy perspective, which is what this workshop is all about, the strategy session when you're trying to think through what this thing is? The short answer is yes, but not to the level you're using Universal Analytics. So in the beginning, there is a massive learning curve to GA4. And I know some of you are probably shaking your head going, I just got through learning Universal and there was already a learning curve for that. And you're right, there was. But you got to go through it again. It's going to be necessary. So Google Analytics 4, brand new platform, completely different machinery that's back there. How you set it up is different. How you put information in there is different. How the information is structured is different. How the reports work is different. Everything is different. And it's evolving very, very quickly because it's new, which means some aspects are a little buggy right now. Some things that you're used to aren't there right now, but they probably will be soon. So some of the things that you like in Universal Analytics just aren't in GA4 yet. They're not available to it. Some of the things you can track with e-commerce transactions, you can't track yet in Google Analytics 4. It's not available yet, but all this stuff will be. So why is Google making such a big push? Because right now is when you got to get used to the platform before it gets so big where there's so much stuff back there. It'll be a lot harder to learn if you wait. So start with the basics. And this is the best time to learn something when it really doesn't matter if you get it right. That's how I'm looking at it. This is what it's like for our company. Universal Analytics is what I use from a marketing perspective. I use the information in Universal Analytics, technically the Data Studio reports that are connected to my Universal Analytics, and I use that to determine what actions I need to take. We have different models and methods to do that. It works really well for us. And I will continue to do that for a while, probably the next year or two, I think. I will be using Universal Analytics as my main source of data because Universal Analytics is what's got my story, my structure. I can tie what's working, what's not very quickly. I can see my goals. We've got our ACE goals, the awareness goals, completion goals, engagement goals. We've got my traffic sources. Everything rolls up into the reports. It is tuned very nicely. It works very well. And of course, with Data Studio, it's even better because we get to see funnel reports and behavior reports and everything else that we want to see so we can forecast and make sure that we're hitting our forecast in terms of the behaviors that we should be eliciting from the website and the results those behaviors should produce. Universal Analytics, thumbs up. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep using it. So we're not going to stop using it. And I have absolutely seen YouTube videos of people out there saying, well, you should make the decision and maybe you should stop using analytics. Do not stop using Universal Analytics. Do not. Universal Analytics is a lot more user-friendly. It's a lot better right now. It's better than Google Analytics 4 is. That does not mean in 6 months from now that GA4 won't be better because GA4 is getting all of the love from Google. Google's putting all their investment into GA4 right now. So they're putting all these new reports that are coming through. They're constantly making updates. And Universal is not getting the love anymore. It's essentially been sort of disconnected at this point. So it's going to float out there and eventually go away. It just will. It's going to take a while, but it will. So now is the time for you as a team, as a company, as the strategist of your organization to work with your implementers to say, okay, we're going to have to wrap our heads around Google Analytics 4. And here's the best part. It doesn't matter if you get it right. Just get it going. Get good enough to get going with this thing. Learn how to use Tag Manager with it. Learn how to use this. Just if you're manually tagging your sites with GTag, they will automatically show up here, which is cool. So you have this little GTag thing. Of course, the best part, and this is why I love it, if you're using Tag Manager, it's automatically doing this GTag stuff, right? Tag Manager automatically does this. You don't have to manually do it. But some companies just aren't doing that. So they want to have manual GTag. So it automatically uses that, which is cool. Again, if you're using Tag Manager, so much easier, which is why I love Tag Manager. But Google Analytics 4, you do need to start getting used to, because you have to start wrapping your head around how events work. You have to start wrapping your head around, like in here, we see all of the different events. You're going to learn lessons with this platform. For example, a capital P purchase is a very different event from a lowercase purchase. This is a reserved event that Google Analytics 4 is ready for and it uses for reports. This, it just treats as a custom event and totally ignores. Scroll, it will automatically track, but it will only automatically track it at 90%. So if you want to have 10, 25, 50, 75% scroll rates, you need to turn off the automatic tracking and put on your own through Tag Manager. So you will still use Tag Manager. We use Tag Manager constantly for this. Remember, Tag Manager makes it's built to collect information. It's better at collecting information. So we use that to get all of these events into Google Analytics 4, and then we use Data Studio to actually build reports so we can see what's going on. And that's where we get our insights, is in the Data Studio side, in that reporting stage. But GA4 is collecting all the events, and we can collect more information, which is kind of nice. You can collect a bunch of information around these different events, but you have to start thinking it through. And this is, again, me personally, as a business owner, as the strategist for our own organization, and I know this stuff, right? But I am still looking at GA4 as, okay, this is a cool platform. Love the direction they're going. I think the machine learning is a super cool angle that makes it future-proof for me. I love that. So my investment in time is going to be worth it. I love that it's built to track users first. I will show you very quickly in the back end of it, in admin, when you come into the different settings, one of the data settings, right? You've got collection and filters and retention coming through here. So you can see where it's getting information from, right? Turning all of this stuff, all this stuff that comes through on. I mean, there's some cool things that you can do with this coming through, right? Data filters is actually fairly new. This is actually really new. This is like within the last day new. I have to say. So this didn't have filters before. Now you have filters. So there you go. This is an example on literally 2 days ago when we were looking at this. Wasn't there. Now data filters exist. This is how fast this platform is evolving. So now I can filter out for internal traffic, and I can create other filters, presumably, because I literally saw this for the first time. I can create other filters coming through where last week you couldn't do this with GA4. This is why it's important for you to be in it now and for you to not care about using it in reality. Don't use it for market decisions. Use it as a practice, like get used to the platform. That's all you're going to be doing, I think, for months. Getting used to this thing, because, filters are a massive thing in analytics. You have to have filters to filter out your data, prepare your views. Notice GA doesn't have views. GA4 does not have views. I would imagine that's coming down the way, or there's going to be some way of getting views. That's not here yet. But again, filters didn't used to be there. Oh, okay, cool. So, some pretty cool things you can take a look at, and more things coming out all the time. This other thing I wanted to show you, default reporting identity. This takes advantage of user ID, which was a huge thing that Universal Analytics could do. We use user ID. So it's got user ID, and by default, it takes that information in by device and it can start. This is how it does a better job of figuring out users. Again, a little machine learning probably involved there maybe, but it's figuring out users. Or you can say by device only, which is, if you don't use user ID. So there's cool things that it does. It's built to figure out who people are, what a user is. So the definition of user is more useful when you're looking at your numbers. So for many, many, many reasons, Google Analytics 4 is something that you should start to look at and start to learn about. And there's lots of different courses. We have our own, so you're more than welcome to take advantage of that. But whether us or somebody else you learn it from, take the time, effort, and energy, because it's going to be worth it for you to actually go through and move forward with Google Analytics 4. So hopefully you got at least one new thing as you were thinking through this. So the whole concept with this is, okay, brand new platform. Think about, yes, it's an upgrade, but it's completely different. So it's not really an upgrade, right? So it's just a completely new thing. It's a separate component, happens to share the same name, but completely different. You will be doing both. Do not disconnect your Universal Analytics. You will still use Universal Analytics, probably for quite some time. So you stay with Universal Analytics and you keep Google Analytics 4 off on the side, and you kind of get used to it, right? Trying to figure out all the bells and whistles, start playing with some of the reports, start figuring out events, figuring out how Tag Manager works. And then you will notice, literally, just like I did minutes ago, you will notice new features all of a sudden that show up, because that's how fast, literally, it's almost on a daily basis, new things are popping back there. It's pretty cool because you get to see all of that happen. But it also, this is why I'm not worried about making Google Analytics 4 my data source for anything. Like, I'm not actually counting on it for any answers for anything, but I'm using it as like, let's get used to, driving this car, right? Figuring out this machine. And then what I expect personally is within, I would say 6 months, I think is what I'm going to do for ourselves. Within 6 months, we'll start actually using it more from a marketing perspective and saying, okay, we're going to start building a lot more Data Studio reports, and Data Studio reports will start getting their answers, the information, I should say, from GA4. Because if you remember, GA4 ultimately, in the long term, will absolutely be the place that you're going to want to be. It's a place that we're going to get all of our data from. But right now, again, don't freak out. You don't have to do this tomorrow, but you should get used to it soon. So within the next month or two, get an analytics, the GA4 account set up, and practice and play around with it. Make sure your team is familiar with it. Get used to how it works with Tag Manager, because it's all different. But it's incredibly useful, and where they're going and where the direction that they're headed is fantastic. So absolutely, I 100% agree. Google Analytics 4 is the direction for sure. They did a fantastic job, but it's going to take a learning curve. So just set your own expectations. Don't think it's going to be easy, 'cause it's probably not, and that's okay, because you're going to still use Universal, so you don't break anything in your own flows that are currently working. So this is like a yes and. It's not an either or. It's a yes and. All right. By the way, I wanted to point this out because I just haven't. I've been doing live streams for a little while on the Workshop Wednesdays. I've always done them to record, and we put them in our member site for the Toolbox members and everything else. And we do answer comments. So if you leave comments in the system, now my fault, totally my fault. I want to apologize to everybody, because I think by default I had comments disabled, because I'm learning too as we go through, and I would turn on the comments like after the fact. So at this point, the comments should be enabled for this video. So you're watching it, you should hopefully be able to see them put comments in, and I'll answer any questions that I possibly can. Remember, we're all learning here though. It's kind of it's a weird position where everybody who knows these tools and how to use them, we all got access to it when you did. So we're all starting off trying to learn stuff. And maybe I'm just ahead of you, but not much. I'm not that far ahead. So happy to address whatever we can and have a make to go through. But I also wanted to acknowledge the chat room for the first time live on a Workshop Wednesday in the YouTube system. When you go to YouTube, because a lot of you watch this on Workshop Wednesday inside our members area, but if you watch it in YouTube, there is a chat room that YouTube has, and I'm seeing people leaving comments there, and I just wanted to thank everybody. So Jonathan, howdy, good to see you, and looks like Neha's here. I hope I got that right. So we've got some anonymous individuals back there too saying, hey, just joined. But yeah, it's a different world. GA4 is a different world, and Neha, I don't want to have time to go too far into questions, but just know that there's a lot to change with GA4. It's completely different platform. So still keep Universal, and you'll still keep using that, but you'll add in GA4 to go through there. So with that, we'll go ahead and move forward and start to wrap this thing up. Now, remember, these workshops, they are available as Workshop Wednesday in the members area for those of you watching it there. But I would also subscribe to YouTube or LinkedIn, wherever you find this video being set out, whatever the platform of choice is. Next week's topic will be a what's new update, which is going to be a lot because there's a lot. So there's new features and updates. The first Wednesday of every month, we always go back for the previous month and we see all the updates that came from Google. So many of you already know about the big ones, which is GA4 was announced or re-announced, and Google Tag Manager changed their preview mode. So we had that. But there's a lot of individual updates that we will talk about in next week's workshop. So we'll go through all the GA4 updates, one of which I believe will be filters, because now you can do filters in GA4. So you'll see that. If you want to be notified of those through YouTube or whatever your platform is of choice, click on subscribe. Right now we're doing this for YouTube. So you just click on subscribe, get notified, and YouTube will send you that little message, and then we can all have some fun there. Otherwise, take a look at the Measure Marketing Academy if you haven't already. Measure.tips/getacademy. We also have a course on Google Analytics 4, the basics, at least we're calling it Win Google Analytics 4 Basics. So if you want to get started with that, it is already a part of the Academy. If you're already an Academy member, then you already have access to it. So you can go through and take a look. If not yet Academy member, take a look at it. Measure.tips/getacademy. We are also having that Google Analytics 4 course as a separate course. This is one of the few times we're doing that. But it is available as a separate course, and I just put a link in the description of this YouTube. So anybody's interested in that can click there to see if they just want to buy the Google Analytics 4 course, because I get it. Sometimes you just want to do that. So you've got the option. Finally, if you are not yet a free Toolbox member, which I've mentioned many times, you should at least be that. Be a free Toolbox member. So go claim that membership. You get Workshop Wednesday, which of course are these workshops that are back there, plus all of our different tools that we create. We allow our free members to have access to those tools as well. So everything from the traffic tracking toolkit, I guarantee I will end up creating some sort of event planning tool for GA4 events to help people wrap their head around the planning stage and how to make sure the data is structured properly. It's not available yet, but I'm positive we'll be doing something like that, because as I'm using this tool, I'm trying to figure out ways to help you use it as well. And so we'll create those tools, we'll put them back in the members area, and all of our Toolbox members, even though it's a free membership, we give access to that, just our way of giving back. All you need to do is go to measure.tips/WW and it will take you there. All right. With that, we'll officially bring this one to a close. What the heck is Google Analytics 4? And do I need it? Hopefully at this point, you know the answer to both. It's a brand new platform that Google's announced to help us future-proof our measurement. It is going to be awesome. It is not the easiest thing to wrap your head around right now, but you do need it. And now is the time to get started. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.